I do not want to attack fellow comrades. Um, I think these people are sorely misguided, to say the least. We're also going to be talking about how Republicans are just hell bent on killing one another with COVID-19 in like a weird biological warfare, except it's directed against themselves. It's very strange. Um, we also have just some further evidence of like the degradation of the discourse in our country as we barrel forward into this ever heightening tension of the election season. And it's gonna be an issue. Boosted Shogun, welcome to the stream. Love having you here. We did not take. It's true. We did not take Vosh's cum pledge. Here on Riverboat Jack Inc. We're coming all the time. Okay. There is no cum pledge. We're just coming all the time. Um, yeah, we're not even talking about tankies. We're going to talk a little bit about Bernie or Busters and the absolute insanity that it takes to reach that level of big-brained intellect on the left, okay? Um in fact, I'm just going to start with that because it made me mad and I before I went live with this, I did see that Vosh was talking about it, which makes me a little bit upset because now I'm going to be rehashing some of his points, but it's true. I'm still upset about it, and I'm still going to talk about it. And heck yeah, it's like a leather type thing. It's very nice. What up, gamers? That's right. Today we're going to be talking about the greatest game of all, aka lefties being dumb. Okay, that's the greatest game of all. Because you know why? You play in yourself. You play in yourself. Now, one of the things that got me more involved in leftist politics when I started developing an interest in these things was, of course, one of the biggest names and groups in the lefty sphere, and that's Chapo Trap House. And for a while, I was really taken in by their willingness to basically call a spade and really rip into both Democrats and Republicans. And, it made me feel vindicated in my like anti-capitalist views. But basically, since Bernie got knocked out of this race, I think they were really on their A game during the Bernie campaign, but when Bernie got knocked out, they lost it. They lost something really important. They lost their guiding star. And right now, their guiding star, Bernie Sanders, is saying, vote for Joe Biden. And that idea is so irreconcilable with their idea of what their political persuasions should be, that they've basically all said, fuck it, we're not going to do that. So the reason I'm talking about Chapo Trap House is because recently one of the boys on the podcast, Virgil Texas, went out and started a new podcast with Briahna Joy, who was Bernie Sanders' former head of comms. Um, sorry, their former national press secretary for Bernie Sanders. Now, nothing wrong with that. I support that endeavor. I always support more lefty voices in the online space. I think we need more of that. However, the absolute doomer pill that the Chapo boys have taken since the loss of Bernie Sanders has absolutely poisoned their ability to participate in the discourse. So basically, what we have here is very recently, Briahna Joy and Virgil Texas had Noam Chomsky on to talk about Bernie or bust. Now, guys, if you're not familiar with who Noam Chomsky is, he is a very noted linguist. He is one of the most cited researchers of all time. And he also paved the way for like intellectual anarchism in the United States to kind of help put it more in the mainstream. Okay. Um, Now, Noam Chomsky was also born in 1928, so he's 91 fucking years old. So, uh, Noam Chomsky comes onto their podcast, which in itself is a miracle, because he's a 91-year-old man who's able somehow to operate the internet, which is quite impressive. Not only that, he's able to coherently talk about complex political arguments at 91 years old. So, Noam Chomsky is hella based and one of the most unimpeachable leftists that currently exists on the planet. Now, the reason Briahna Joy and Virgil Texas had him on their podcast was specifically to attack him for his position of being pro-Biden in a election cycle that is between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. There is no way for Bernie Sanders to currently win. Okay? It's not going to happen. There's no way for a third party to win in this country. It's not going to happen. So realistically, the choice we have here is between Joe Biden or Donald Trump. We get 4 years with one of those two men. Okay? Now, you need to understand that the position that Briahna Joy takes, Briahna Joy Gray takes is that basically the Democratic Party has ingrained this like long-term attitudes and ideas that are making it impossible for the progressive left to win, and therefore they are also our enemies in every possible circumstance and should be fought just as much as Republicans. And in fact, that the difference between Republicans and Democrats is negligible to the point of basically all of them just being a gigantic block towards a progressive future, which in some cases might be true. However, what progressive leftists understand generally, if they're not, putting rocks in their brain, is that you do what you can, you play the hand that you're given, and you make the best of it. And sometimes making the best of it is choosing the less bad option out of a bunch of bad options. Like, however, their counter to this idea is that you should go with the worst option. In this case, you should allow Donald Trump to win, either by not voting or by voting for Donald Trump, even. Although they would probably say by not voting, because by not voting, you're not participating in the system and you're showing what a principled stand you have and how much you're proving how much the Democratic Party needs you, and that at some point in the hypothetical future, the Democratic Party will sit down, crunch the numbers, and be like, oh, okay, we need to swing to the left in order to get these people. The problem with that calculus is that there aren't enough leftists who are A, going to do that, and B, if there were, the Democratic Party would just swing to the right, because how politics works is you go after the people who are more likely to vote for you, and if you have established yourself as a non-voting bloc, that just means that you're not going to vote for them if you're not their perfect candidate. So, for the Democrats, if a bunch of progressive leftists just sit out this election, it just means they're going to swing right towards the block of voters who actually participated in the previous election. That's what they do. That's how politics works. So it's then for like they've been perpetuating these ideas throughout the election cycle. So it's not surprising that when they have Noam Chomsky on their show, and Noam Chomsky has written a thing about how you should really vote for Joe Biden, that they double team a 91-year-old man on their podcast to try and show how much of an old white man he is and how out of touch he is. And the thing is, he is a little bit out of touch because he's a 91-year-old man. It'd be incredible if he was in touch, but he's again a 91-year-old man. But on top of that, not only is he a 91-year-old man, he's 100% right in his take on this subject. So he might be out of touch, but he still understands, because his head isn't full of rocks, that you vote for the less bad option in order to move your agenda forward, because you're that much closer to achieving your agenda. So I'm gonna throw up a thing that has been passed around Twitter here for a little bit, and it is Noam Chomsky's reasons that you should vote for Joe Biden. And I'm just going to read it verbatim because it's better than anything I could possibly say here. And I'll throw it up on the screen for you guys so you can read it too, okay? All right. Well, there is a traditional left position which has been pretty much forgotten, unfortunately, but it's the one I think we should adhere to. That's the position that real politics is constant activism. It's quite different from the establishment position, which says politics means focus, laser-like, on the quadrennial extravaganza, then go home and let your superiors take over. The left position has always been, you're working all the time, and every once in a while there's an event called an election. This should take you away from real politics for 10 or 15 minutes. Then you go back to work. At this moment, the difference between the candidates is a chasm. There has never been a greater difference. It should be obvious to anyone who's not living under a rock. So, the traditional left position says, take the 15 minutes, push the lever, go back to work. Now, the activist left has not been making the choice that you mentioned. It's been doing both. Take Biden's campaign positions further to the left than any Democratic candidate in memory on things like climate. True! It's far better than anything that preceded it. True! Not because Biden had a personal conversion or the DNC had some great insight, but because they're being hammered on by activists coming out of the Sanders movement and others. Which, by the way, I'm just going to interject here, that's why Bernie Sanders is one of the greatest living leftists that we have. That's why Bernie Sanders is put up consistently on a pedestal among leftist circles. Because the movement he spawned, the conversation, the cultural shift that his candidacies have ignited and perpetuated, have basically taken us in the span of 4 years from, we need access to healthcare, to, no, everyone should have healthcare. It should be free at point of sale. And we should just all pay for it out of taxes. And in fact, maybe the rich should pay more for it because they have more money. Like, the gulf between where we were and where we are now because of Bernie Sanders is huge. So, I'm going to continue. The climate program, a $2 trillion commitment to dealing with the extreme threat of environmental catastrophe, was largely written by the Sunrise Movement and strongly endorsed by the leading activists on climate change. The ones who managed to get the Green New Deal on the legislative agenda. That's real politics. This is not support for Biden. It is support for the activists who have been at work constantly, creating the background within the party in which the shifts took place, and who have followed Sanders in actually entering the campaign and influencing it. Support for them. Support for real politics. The left position is you rarely support anyone. You vote against the worst. You keep the pressure and activism going. So, guys, the point of this is that what Noam Chomsky is saying is not you vote and then you go back to work at your workplace. That's not what he's saying, which is what some people have taken from his statements. And they're making fun of him for saying like, oh, it only takes 15 minutes to vote. Like, no, you actually have to be there for hours. It's like, it doesn't matter. That's immaterial to what he's saying. What he is saying is that you should be participating to some degree in activism all the time in whatever you're doing. So, like, whether that is being at work, being at your, burger flipping job, and having some time to talk with your comrades on either side of the line, and just, trying to foster a sense of, the worker mentality, that worker camaraderie, right? Because on some level, everyone who exists within a workplace has an awareness that they are being screwed over by their boss, that they are not getting as much as they should be, that they are not receiving the full value of their labor. We all have that underlying sense when we do our job. And it becomes especially clear the more exploited you are. So what Noam Chomsky is saying is that constant activism can take place in the workplace. It can take place at protests. It can take place by calling your senators. It can take place in a myriad of ways. And there is very little to be lost by spending the time to go vote to either further your agenda in some way. In this case, the example he gives is voting for Biden to obtain a $2 trillion investment in the environment, which, while it might not be enough, gets us $2 trillion closer to stopping the horrible apocalypse that is incoming in our future. Or voting against the thing that will make life infinitely worse. So, for example, voting against Trump because Trump is an open fascist and has explicitly, in no uncertain terms, made that clear over the course of his entire presidency, but especially over the last several weeks, okay? So these are great reasons to vote for Biden. And the counter argument, which we will listen to right now, comes from a segment of the Bad Faith podcast, the one with Briahna Joy Gray and Virgil Texas. Here we go. Let's find this. That's not it. That's also not it. Where did it go? Nope. Nope. I had it. I had it up. I had it up. Where'd it go? Where did it go? Okay. Here we go.
Of everybody, what are the long-term consequences of everybody on the broad left, Democrats, liberals, everyone, saying that under any circumstances, we will vote for a Democratic candidate as long as they are incrementally better than the Republican candidate? Does that way of thinking contribute to the rightward shift of the Democratic Party over years? And what mechanism will ever stop that shift if we're not willing to ever, under any circumstances, leverage our votes?
What you're saying, if you think it through, is we should help Trump win because maybe in the long run, that'll affect the Democratic Party. That's a terrible choice. Helping Trump win, as you're proposing, would mean 4 more years of destruction of the environment, getting possibly to tipping points, which would be irreversible, certainly making any effort to deal with it very difficult. It would mean stacking the judiciary with young, ultra-right lawyers, top to bottom, so that nothing would be possibly done for a generation, and I can go on and on. I don't think that's a wise choice, just on the hope that maybe sometime in the long term, the Democratic Party will pay attention to the fact that you're part of the 50% of non-voters.
I take the multi-generational threat very seriously. As a Black American whose family members have been living as a third tier in American society. My mother was born into an America that didn't recognize her basic human rights. In 1960, she's a relatively young woman. And so what concerns me is the way in which the vote blue no matter who mindset basically privileges more recent concerns that are equally grave as more long-standing concerns that are built in the status quo, and says we have to vote for X candidate to prevent X ill from happening. At the same time, those who have suffered under the status quo never seem to get an opportunity to have their issues heard.
So basically, the argument being made here is that, well, I'm slowly bleeding out and I will die within 6 hours. But if someone comes up to me and says, "Hey, I'm going to put a bullet in your brain," or that person might help you 4 hours from now. Essentially, this sort of logic is just saying, yeah, you should go with the bullet in your brain now, on the off chance that you survive the bullet in your brain, because there's no guarantee that the person who might treat you in 4 hours will be able to adequately treat you in 4 hours. So it is an insane take that just it gives into doomerism completely. We should somehow capitulate. We should capitulate to fascism because the Democratic Party doesn't listen enough. And I'm very sympathetic to voters who feel like Black or Native issues haven't been addressed adequately, because they're right. Those issues haven't been addressed adequately. But also, that's not an excuse to drive your fucking car off a cliff to, like, spite the people who haven't been listening to you. You do what you can to fight another day, which is what Noam Chomsky is saying, which he's 100% right about. And one of the most galling things is that Briahna Joy Gray and Virgil Texas have declared that they somehow won this debate or put Noam Chomsky in his place. And I'll say that Noam Chomsky hasn't been right about everything. He signed the J.K. Rowling, like, anti-transgender letter, but I'm willing to guess that he was signing it as a move against censorship, which is what the letter purported to be about, and not because he actually hates transgender people. So, like, there are things that he does wrong because he's a 91-year-old man who's not necessarily in touch with internet culture, but the idea that he's wrong on this very clear political issue, that you should minimize the immediate harm that will come at all costs, and then continue to push and fight and do whatever you can to move the party left after you have solved the immediate crises. That's just how politics works right now. We don't have a magic button we can press. Even if we had gotten Bernie Sanders into office, we still should have kept pushing him further to the left. Like, that's what progressive politics is all about. Because whatever we're going to get underneath the capitalist system in the United States is not going to be good enough without extreme amounts of additional pressure, extreme amounts of additional activism. And that's what Noam Chomsky was talking about in his arguments for voting for Biden. So it's incredibly angering and incredibly disappointing to see these two people, Virgil Texas and Briahna Joy Gray, pushing against Noam Chomsky for a very level-headed, very rooted in experiential take. That should, again, be obvious to anyone who has a brain that isn't entirely made out of stone, okay? So, boom! That's what I gotta say about Briahna Joy Gray and Virgil Texas. Bad Faith Podcast. Not good. Not good. At least in this case. You know, maybe their other stuff is good. I haven't listened to the rest of their podcasts. But yeah, not terribly compelled to listen to anything they have to say anymore. So, Yeah. How we feeling, guys? How we feeling? Lagaheim, hello. Welcome to the stream. You're a new face. I appreciate you popping in. His arguments seem to be my minority isn't getting much talk, so fuck all other minorities. Yeah, I mean, like the argument is basically, there are still institutional problems affecting Native and Black people and Brown people and non-white individuals, and so we should capitulate to fascism, and that will somehow solve the problem, which it won't, and that's an incredibly short-sighted and not short-sighted, but like far-sighted. What which I always forget which is the one where you can only see things that are far away and not what's up close. Either way, it's dumb, and you should be using your brain a little bit more than this podcast is asking you to. Okay? Yes, far-sighted. Thank you, Ashley. Guys, here's how Bernie can guys, here's how Bernie can still win, okay? He's going to secretly marry Joe Biden and slowly supplant Kamala Harris, right? And through that mechanism, he will secretly become the shadow vice president. And when Joe Biden dies of natural causes in office, Bernie Sanders will become the true president, aka the shadow president. And it will be like a Weekend at Bernie's situation where Bernie Sanders will be like puppeteering Joe Biden. It'll be comedic gold whenever they make the documentary about his presidency.